just to examine the philosophy of these people who aren't thinking clearly. It's not that they're evil, although I think some of the results of their ideas would be evil. One of the things that Ta-Nehisi Coates believes in, and very strongly, is reparations for black people, which is an injustice. It is an inherent injustice. It is immoral to ask people who did nothing to pay people who did not suffer the crime that you are repairing them for, that you are giving them reparations for. Coates's idea is that bigotry has deprived them of economic value so that we have to pay them, the country has to pay them that economic value back. He doesn't seem to notice the fact that we have never done that with other people who suffered bigotry, like the Jews, like the Irish, like the Italians. They all suffered bigotry, and yet those people moved forward. Why? Because they weren't treated any differently than anybody else. It took a longer time for America to get the message, which they had to get, that black people too have to be treated like everybody else. But once they get that message, you should not need reparations to move forward. So listen to this question that he asks AOC about racism and reparations. This is cut 1.
You find people who are very, aggressive about defending the state as an actor, as an evener in their lives, but don't want certain other people to actually have access to those, benefits. And so I wonder, it strikes me that the task of the movement today, and people are actively, trying to tackle this, is to craft one that argues for a better world, that argues for, a state that, actually does, try to make for just outcomes, but not just outcomes for certain people. How do we escape, for instance, the perils of what, overtook us during the New Deal, which actually in many cases opened up a wealth gap, as much as it, made for our middle class? How do we forge that sort of movement?
Absolutely. Well, I think the first thing that we need to do is realize that there's a balance between this more universal struggle for racial, social, and economic dignity, but at the same time, not erasing the individual stories of different communities.
Now, Ta-Nehisi Coates is not a dumb guy, and AOC really is just a buffoon. She really doesn't know what she's talking about. But he starts out talking about there are some people who believe that the state should redistribute wealth, but they don't want it redistributed to certain people, by which I guess he meant people of color. First of all, he's right about that. There are such people, but they're not talking sense. So that's not a license for him to talk nonsense. If the state should be redistributing wealth, which means stealing money from people who earned it, and decreeing that the state now has the power to figure out where to spend that, who to give that money to, which I believe is wrong, inherently wrong, then it should be given to everybody. Of course, it should be given to people of all colors. But then he goes on to say that we get in this situation like the New Deal, which actually increased disparity of wealth. And that, of course, is what socialism always does. That is what government redistribution always does. Why? Because they say they're going to go after the billionaires, but the billionaires can always avoid taxes. So then eventually they go after people who sound like they're rich to people who have less money. So I've heard Hillary Clinton say, people who earn over $250,000. Well, let me tell you something. You live in New York City, you live in LA, $250,000, you have 2 kids, that's middle class. I know it sounds like a lot of money if you're living out somewhere where everything is cheaper and you're making $50,000 and you're living a good life, but there are different situations in different places. So that is not rich. I mean, somebody who's making that money still has to work, which is what I consider to be rich, is when you never have to work again. The billionaires always get away, and what happens in socialism is the middle class disappears. And then you have the powerful and the rich who become the same people, because the way you get rich under socialism is knowing the powerful. And then you have the poor who keep getting told, hey, it's great because your health care is free. I mean, just look at Cuba. It could be Cuba. You could have health care there. Yeah, it's 1920s health care, but it's free. And that is the mistake he's making even as he speaks. Her answer, what she essentially says is we need to get beyond racism, but we still need to think of ourselves in terms of race. That's what she says. And it's an amazing thing, this kind of wealth of ignorance that she brings to the political field that has made her a star. It is the ignorance, which becomes viciousness after a while, that makes her a star.